for taking the time. I know we're Erev Chag. It's not always easy to find time to learn, but I deeply appreciate the opportunity to learn with you, and I really feel that that is what it is. We're learning together. I just happen to be 2 days ahead of you because I prepared it, but in about an hour, we'll all be in the same place. So that's good. We are really learning together in that regard. The topic that I chose is finding God in Elul and the rest of the year. And of course, if we think about it, it's a topic that's very apropos to this time of the year in the Jewish calendar. But we all know instinctively, right, that this topic is relevant throughout the entire year. We are constantly searching to find God in the world in which we live. And I don't believe, a lot of times I'll spend time elaborating on the question and the topic that we're going to look into, but I think this topic really speaks for itself, and we need to spend our time and our learning in responding to the issue, right? And I'm not just referring to COVID, I'm referring to pre-COVID, I'm referring to forever, right? Sometimes, and it's a topic for another time, but we can learn topics in Tanakh, and it looks almost so easy to find God, but it really never was, and it still isn't. And so I want to start by giving you the framework of what we're going to learn together tonight. We're going to look at a text, and that text is going to give us the opportunity to talk about the broader question of finding God. But we need to take a few steps to get there. We're going to learn a text, and as we go through, you will see hopefully quite clearly why this text presents itself with the opportunity to talk on the broader topic of how can we find God. So the text we're going to look at, if you look at the sheets that you have, the setting is in Sefer Breshit, the beginning of Parshat Vayetze. What has just transpired right before here is Yaakov has stolen the brachot, which were intended for Esav, and he's running away to avoid the wrath of Esav, who, simply put, wants to kill him. And take a look at what happens right after Yaakov runs from home. So we're going to read through this, somewhat quickly, not speedy, but somewhat quickly. The English is there as well. Breshit Chavchet, starting with Pasuk Yod. Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva, vayelech Harana. Right, Yaakov runs from Be'er Sheva and he's on his way to Haran. Vayifga b'makom, vayalen sham kiva hashemesh. He comes to a place and he lies down there because the sun had set. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom, vayasem me'rashotav. He took from the stones that were in that place and he put them or it under his head. Vayishkav makomahu, and he fell asleep. Vayachalom, he has a dream. V'hinei sulam mutzav artzav rosho magia hashamayim. Right, there in his dream, there's a ladder that was firmly planted on the ground, but it reached all the way up to heaven. V'hinei malachei elokim olim v'yordim bo, and there were angels that were ascending and descending on this ladder. Right, this is not an unknown story. And then we continue. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav vayomar, and then God appears. And God says to him, Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha v'Elokei Yitzchak. I'm the God of Avram, I'm the God of Yitzchak. Ha'aretz asher ata shochev aleha lecha etnena ulizarecha. The land that you're sleeping on, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to your children. V'haya zaracha kafar ha'aretz ufaratza yama v'keid matzafona v'negva. Right, your nation will stretch from the west to the east, to the north, to the south. V'nivrechu b'chal kol mishpachot ha'adama u'bizarecha. And all the nations of the world will be blessed through you, on account of you. I'm with you, I'm going to protect you in all your endeavors. I'm going to return you to this land. I will not leave you, I will make good on my promise, I will do what I promised to you. And this is the part that I really want to focus on. Vaikat Yaakov Mishnato, Yaakov wakes up from his sleep, Vayomer, Achein Yesh Hashem B'makom Hazeh, Va'anochi Lo Yadati. God is in this place, and I had no idea. I had no idea God was in this place. The next word, Pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayira. Right? Simply put, he was shaken, he was afraid, he was startled. Unclear exactly how to translate that. Vayomar, Manora hamakom hazeh, ein zeh ki im beit Elokim v'zeh shar hashamayim. Literally, oh my God, right? Oh my God, God is in this place. How awesome is this place? This is the dwelling place of God. And that from here, there's an open gateway to heaven. Okay. So quick summary, Yaakov runs away. He has a dream. In the dream, he sees angels. God appears to him, promises him he will be protected. He will be given the land. And Yaakov wakes up from the dream, and his reaction, which could have been many things, as you're playing the story out in your head, is not, relief, not, okay, I don't have to worry about Esav, not, I feel calmer. It's, oh my God, God was in this place? I had no idea. This is unbelievable. God is here. This is his reaction. And this is why this text pulled me, right? When we talk about trying to find God, this is somebody who is startled by the presence of God that he did not initially notice. And if we read the story carefully and slowly, paying attention to language, paying attention to sequence of events, a number of anomalies jump out at us, which is exactly what all the commentators do. They see Yaakov's reaction and they say, what did I miss? I need to go back and reread the story. I missed something here. His response doesn't seem congruent with what just happened. So I need to go back and reread the story and try to figure out what I missed here. And we're going to look with the help of two Mefarshim at rereading the story. Mefaresh number 1 is Rashi, and Mefaresh number 2 is Rashbam. And we're going to look at how they read the story. And once we do that, we will then have a lot of material to help us have the broader conversation about how to find God, how to notice God. What did Yaakov see that startled him? Could he have seen it before? Should he have seen it before? There's so much to talk about. So let's do this as succinctly and as organized as we can so we don't lose focus of our broader goal, right? Rashi begins, which you see on your sheet, by asking us a very simple question. He starts by saying, did you notice that the location of where Yaakov arrives is not referred to with a name? It's referred to as Hamakom. He arrives in the place, a place. And Rashi says in the first entry under Rashi Chavchet Yudal through Yudbet, he says, Vayifka b'makom, lo hiskir hakatuv be'eza makom. The text does not tell us which place. Ela b'makom haniskar b'makom acher. Rather, it mentions the place, which is a reference to another place mentioned as the place. Who? Har HaMoriah. What is this place? Har HaMoriah. Shnamar bo le'el and Perak Chafet vayar et hamakom merachok. Rashi says the place is not named. It's referred to as the, capital T, H-E place, just like another place was referred to as the Hamakom, capital T-H-E place. What is that place? He says, go back to Perak Chafet, and you'll see Avram at the Akedah arrives at Hamakom, the Makom Asher Areka, the place that I will show you, right? The place. And the cryptic language, according to Rashi's understanding, is because you and I, of course, are reading the text as Rashi is, and the minute we see Hamakom, we think, oh my gosh, it must be that place. Just like Avram came to Hamakom, God told him, I will show you that place. Both of these must be really significant places where something significant is going to happen, because they both have this almost undefined nature, but are described in the same way as Hamakom. And then Rashi goes on and he says, keep reading. There's more cryptic things happening in this story. What's the very next thing that happens? Kiva hashemesh, because the sun had set. Rashi says, slow down and read the text again. Hayalo lichtov vayavo hashemesh. Right? The text should have said, and the sun set, and he spent the night there. Right? He's traveling, the sun sets, and he needs to lie down and rest. Kiva hashemesh. What does the text say instead? The text says, he lied, if you go back to the pasuk, it says he lied down there because the sun had set, as opposed to the sun set and therefore he lied down there. And again, if you're reading it, looking for clues, you'll notice these things. And continue in Rashi, mashma sheshak'alo chama pitom. He says the implication is that the sun set suddenly, right? He lied down there because the sun just set. It's like almost like when a storm comes, the clouds come and the sky goes gray in an instant. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And so he lied down because the sun had set. Shalo ba'onata, not at the time when it was supposed to set, kidei she'alin sham, so that it would force him to lie down there, right? What picture is Rashi painting? This is a divinely orchestrated scene. He comes to Har HaMoriah, and the sun sets early because God wants to talk with him there in Har HaMoriah. And so he's forced to stop there. He really should have been traveling another 3 or 4 hours, but he's forced to stop there, and he lies down there because the sun set on him. And then Rashi continues and he says, take a look at the dream. Olim v'yardim. The angels were going up and coming down. Says Rashi, where do angels come from? Up. Shouldn't they be coming down and going up? Not going up and coming down? Right? So Rashi says, Olim techila v'achar kach yordim. They were going up and coming down. And if you read, it's a long Rashi, so I just put it there in English. He says, listen, right? The angels who escorted him in the land of Israel don't go out of the land. So they went from the earth and ascended to the sky. And after the angels of outside the land of Israel descended to escort him, right? We could talk about this Rashi for a long time, but very, very short, right? What he basically says is these angels were orchestrated. Some angels were coming one way, some angels were going another way. This was a very highly orchestrated dream with intention of even the extent of which angels are going up, which angels are coming down. And that's why the angels are coming up, because that's one set of angels, and a different set of angels is then coming down. And so if we take just those 3 entries of Rashi, and I gave for you the paragraph again. Do you have it in red, by the way, in between the psukim? Do you have that in red? Someone just nod their head? Yes? You do? Okay, great. So look at the story again from Rashi's perspective, and let's read through it very quickly. Rashi says, here's how the story works. Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. Right? He's on his way from Be'er Sheva. He's on his way to Haran. Vayifga b'makom. He rests in that place. Har HaMoriah. He rested in Har HaMoriah. Vayelen shah kivah hashemesh. He lied down there because the sun set on him early before it was supposed to. The sun was totally going against what nature should have taken its course. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. Oh, did I skip the Vayikach me'avnei hamakom? I skipped a Rashi. Nobody caught me on that. Did you notice that? Go up one Rashi. You didn't want to tell me? You're so sweet. Okay, go up 1 second. Go up 1 second, right? The Rashi right before the angels. I skipped that one by accident, right? Vayaseme rashotav. You see that? He took from the stones of the place. So Rashi says there, Hitchilo mirivot zuim zu. It says Vayaseme rashotav. He took from the stones, plural. And Rashi says Hitchilo mirivot zuim zu. The stones started to argue. It's a famous midrash. I learned it as a kid, right? I thought it was real till I realized it wasn't in the psukim. It was only in the midrash, right? So they started to argue. Zot omeret alay yaniach tzaddik rosho. I want the tzaddik to rest his head on me. That was stone number 1. V'zot omeret alay yaniach. And the other stone said, no, I want his head to rest on me. Miyad asa'an hakadosh baruch hu even achat. So what did God do? He took all the stones like silly putty and he mushed them together to become one stone. V'zeu shamar. And that's why it says later, a few psukim later, vayikach et ha'even. The language changes to singular. He takes the stone, asher sam me'rashotav, that he had put under his head, even though the first time it says, in the plural, he took the stones. So Rashi brings this midrash that even the stones, the inanimate objects, were part of this divinely orchestrated plan. Even the stones wanted to get in on the action. They knew something awesome was happening here, and they wanted to get in on the action. I want to be the star in the movie, to have his head lie down on me, right? I want to be the stone that plays that role. So now I'm sorry, go back to the paragraph again. Vayetze Yaakov Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana, pasuk Yud Aleph, vayifga b'makom. He lied down in Har HaMoriah. Vayasem sham kivah hashemesh. The sun set way earlier than it should have, and therefore he was forced to lie down there in Har HaMoriah. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He took from the stones of the place because they were fighting with each other. It was almost like he couldn't grab a stone. It was like, if you ever picked up a seashell and there's an animal inside of it, and then it starts crawling. Right? So like he thought he took one, then it moved, then another one, he took another one, right? So he took from these stones, right? Vayishkav makomahu, and he lies down in that place. Pasuk Yud Bet. Vayachalom v'hinei sulav mutzav artav rosh hamayeshamayim. And he has a dream of this ladder, and the angels don't start from the shamayim coming down. They start from the earth going up, and it's one set of angels going up, and it's a different set of angels coming down. The whole scene from start to finish is divinely orchestrated against the laws of nature, right? What we would call a miraculous scene. This whole scene was miraculous. And therefore, according to Rashi's reading, Yaakov wakes up, and what's his reaction? Oh my God, right? This is unreal. What just happened? I'm in Har HaMoriah. I have stones fighting over my head. I see one set of angels who are going up, a different set coming down. The sun set earlier than it should have. Of course God is here. This is miraculous. What's going on? Okay, that's scenario number one. Let's put a pin in that for a minute. Let's look at scenario number two, the Rashbam. The Rashbam is Rashi's grandson, much more focused on what we call pshat, reading the story in context, right? A lot of people say it's simple. It doesn't mean simple. The context can be quite complex, but he likes to keep his interpretation within the context of the storyline. He doesn't want to go too far afly from what's happening in the text itself. He wants to stay grounded in the text. So Rashbam reads the story. You'll see even his commentary is much more succinct. And Rashbam says, here's how I read it. You ready? Here we go. Vayifga b'makom. He landed in that place. He stopped in that place. You know what place it was? Ira lo darkav makom achad chutz me'ir luz. I don't know, some random place outside of the Ir Luz on his way. You know, some like, you know, he stopped, he saw a rest sign, rest stop 20 miles, and he got off, right? He got off the highway at that rest stop. It was somewhere on his way. It was on or near a town near Luz, right? Some random place. And then he goes on, Kiva HaShemesh. He says, V'lo hayalo p'nai lehikanais ba'ir bayom. He said, listen, the sun set. Don't make anything too much of it, because the sun had set, he had to go rest, right? Maybe he tried to push a little longer, right? He thought he could travel a little longer than he could have, but the sun set, and so he simply stopped at the nearest city. Vaikach, he took achat. He took one of the stones. One of the stones. He said, listen, you read the pasuk a few psukim later when it says he took the stone. So it's saying there were many stones around and he took one of them. And then, olim v'yardim, referring to the angels again. And this is my favorite one. He says, Lefi pshat, ein ledakdik b'mashi higdim olim li'yardim. If you want to just read the story contextually, don't make such a big deal. Don't read into the fact that the angels are first going up and then coming down. Shekain derech eretz lahaskir aliyah kodem yirida. Because the way that we speak, which we have a concept when we learn Tanakh, right? That dibra Torah k'lashon bnei adam. There are times where the text speaks the language of the human being. So we speak, what goes up comes down. We don't speak, what comes down goes up, right? That's not how we talk. And so this is written from a perspective of a person who's watching it. They probably see it as up and down. Okay, so it's down and up and down, right? We do it in the way that we're comfortable with. So you read now the story according to Rashbam. Took us a lot less time. And you see the Rashbam reads the story very straightforward. He says, Vayitze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. He left Be'er Sheva. Vayifga b'makom. He happens upon a place, I don't know, some place along the way that he saw a rest stop at. Vayelen sham kiva shemesh. He didn't have time to travel to the next big city. The sun was setting, and so he stopped at the closer place. Vayikach, he took achat, one of the stones, and he put it under his head, and he has a dream, right? Pasuk Yud Bad, Vayachalom v'yinei sulam utzav artzav v'roshom ha'yeh shamayim. There's a ladder on the ground going up to the sky, and the malachei elokim olim v'yardim bo. The angels are coming up and down and up. It's one and the same. Once you start the circuit, it's almost like you can't even tell what they're doing first, what they're doing second. They're going up, they're coming down, they're coming down, they're going up. It's the same thing, right? It's like if you look at a Ferris wheel at the bottom or at the top. They're going up, they're coming down, they're coming down, they're going up. Big deal, no big deal. So let's pause for 1 second, right? We look at these two versions of the story. And remember, our goal is to try to understand Yaakov's response. God is here, and I didn't know it, because we want to try to better, right, understand how we can find God. And we look at Rashi and we look at Rashbam, and seemingly they seem to be on the complete opposite sides of the table. Rashi sees a divinely orchestrated scene, and Rashbam sees a pretty mundane, ordinary scene. And I think that very often this happens where you look at two approaches and they look like they're standing opposite one another, where in reality, right, they're two sides of the same coin. Where Rashi and Rashbam are opposite each other, but they're on two sides of the same coin. Because Rashi's presenting us with the possibility that there are moments of miraculous or extraordinary nature where we simply see the divine element. And we have those moments. Not often enough in our times, but we have them. And comes Rashbam, and Rashbam says, one second, I want to talk about what and this is me, Shoshana, right, think most of us relate to today, and that is finding God in the ordinary, in the mundane, right? I don't think we need to spend another 25 minutes talking about Rashi, because when it's so clear and the divine element is there, right, it's kind of hard to miss it unless you really want to miss it. What I'd like to spend the rest of our time talking about is how on earth Rashbam understands Yaakov's ability to see God in the mundane. How on earth, if this was ordinary, there was nothing extraordinary about it. There was no sun setting early. There were no stones fighting. There was no intervention of unique angels. This wasn't a place, you weren't at Har HaMoriah. How on earth did Yaakov see God in that place where he previously had not noticed? He had not noticed God. And that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about. And I'd like to suggest, and when we go through these two things, I definitely will ask for your feedback if time permitting, and I'll try to make sure we have some, because I think we can all learn from each other. Certainly, I know I can, right? I really mean it. I'm continuously learning from ideas that are brought to my attention, where I think I've read like every possible source, and then somebody says, I was thinking, and I'm like, genius, right? It's the best feeling in the world. It really is, when you just feel like, yes, you've given me something new to think about. So I really encourage that very much, right? So I want to talk about how we can find God in the mundane, in the ordinary. And I'd like to suggest two skills. And if they resonate with you, I'm thrilled. And if they don't, I deeply apologize, because they're skills that I relate to. And so I'm not, I don't expect, right, everybody to relate to them as I do, but I'm hoping that they're broad enough that you can find something in them. The first skill, right, the first tool, if you will, that you can take with you to try to deepen seeing God in the ordinary is what I'd like to call nurturing or developing a sense of awe or a sense of reverence. And I'm going to explain exactly what I mean, but those two words are the key words. Nurturing and developing a sense of awe and a sense of reverence. Those are synonymous in the way that I'm presenting them. And I really want to flesh them out. And we're going to do that with the next page of sources, right? Beginning with The Human Soul's Quest for God. It's an article that was written by Harold Kushner. I thought he said it succinctly and powerfully and with tremendous relevance. He uses the word reverence. Some writers use the word awe, some use the word reverence, right? But he uses the word reverence. And what he writes is the following. We're going to read it together. He says, reverence is being in the presence of a power so overwhelming that it defines who you are. You feel small, but you don't feel diminished. It's not fear. When you're afraid, you're overawed by something and you want to run away. When you feel reverent, you're overawed, but you want to come closer. Today, in our modern world, we're so good at minimizing the domain of God and intruding holy spaces, claiming them for our own, that we end up with a lot to feel proud about as people and nothing to inspire us. No sense of awe for that which is beyond us. He talks a lot in this article. I debated back and forth whether or not to include it because I didn't want it to take on a life of its own, but he talks a lot about his own personal feeling walking into some of the old shuls and cathedrals, likewise, and the sense of awe you feel when you walk into them, that you do feel small and you do feel put in your place, but it doesn't make you want to leave. It makes you want to stay and find your space within that big, space that you're within. And so the first step here, right, in developing a sense of reverence and developing a sense of awe is being in a place where you do feel small, but not diminished. It beckons you to find your place in a much bigger sea. It draws you to come closer. That's when you're feeling reverence or you're feeling awe, when you're captured by something, right? Rabbi Abram Joshua Heschel, who probably gets the award for talking about awe. It courses through all of his works. It's something I've been trying to put together for a long time. Please God, it will happen soon, doing a series on his writings. One of my favorite stories, which will kind of set the table for what's to come, is he talks about how he was taking a walk in Central Park with a colleague. And he got to a place in Central Park. He didn't wear a kippah on a regular basis unless he was praying or eating. And he took out a kippah from his pocket and he put it on his head. And the colleague who was walking with him said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "This is a moment of prayer for me. To be in this place in nature, I'm awed by where I am. I feel the presence of God here." And he took that kippah and he put it on his head. And so keep that story in mind as he writes. I gave you 6 cut and pasted entries from so many. But he helps us develop the concept of reverence and awe even deeper. He says, the meaning of awe is to realize that life takes place under wide horizons that range beyond the span of an individual life, or even the life of a nation, a generation, even an era, right? What do you get from that sentence? Big, right? Lots of time, big. Awe enables us to perceive in the world intimations of the divine, to sense in small things the beginning of infinite significance, to sense the ultimate in the common and the simple, to feel in the rush of the passing the stillness of the eternal. Heschel was insistent that we must spend time in nature, without music in our ears, in quiet, under the sun, under the stars, next to water, next to trees. Nature presents us with a sense of reverence and awe that man-made objects simply cannot compete with. And how do we develop that and nurture that in our man-made batei knesiot, right? How do we bring that into our houses of worship, right? And so that's something he touches upon. Let's keep reading. He says, what we cannot comprehend by analysis, we become aware of in awe. Awe is an insight better conveyed in attitude than in words. The more eager we are to express it, the less remains of it. He writes in another place, I'm going to pause for a second, that he was watching a sunset and someone started to speak to him. And he said, shh, let's just look, right? Let's just look. Let's not talk, right? If we describe it, we're losing a piece of it because it's something you have to take in experientially, not talk about it per se, but experience it. And I'm going to continue. Knowledge is fostered by curiosity, questions, talking. Wisdom is fostered by awe. Think about that one. Wisdom is fostered by awe, listening, learning, humility, wondering, knowing one's place, feeling small within something much bigger, but again, not feeling diminished, not feeling like I'm worthless, realizing that I have a place, but I know what it is. And there are, of course, moments of higher and lower intensity of awe. Not every awe moment has to be overwhelming. And he goes on and he says, this is one of the goals of the Jewish way of living, to experience commonplace deeds as spiritual adventures, to feel the hidden love and wisdom in all things. Awe, rather than faith, is the cardinal attitude of the religious Jew. Awe precedes faith. It is at the root of faith. We must grow in awe in order to reach faith. We could really spend an hour just talking about this. I'm just trying to give you little pieces of what he presents. And I'll summarize it at the end. He says, among the many things that religious tradition holds in store for us is a legacy of wonder. And the surest way to suppress our ability to understand the meaning of God and the importance of worship is to take things for granted. Indifference to the sublime wonder of living is the root of sin, right? To pause, to meditate, to slow down, to really appreciate everything. That is the beginning of taking steps towards awe, towards reverence. And then he says, in a final quote, wisdom comes from awe rather than from shrewdness. It is evoked not in moments of calculation, but in moments of being in rapport with the mystery of reality, right? The reason why I so deeply appreciate that line is because we spend so much time applauding that which we know. And he says, yeah, and that leads to knowledge, right? And that leads to, what's the word he used before? He says, I think it was knowledge. He says, yeah, it was knowledge, right? Knowledge comes from curiosity, from knowing, but wisdom, right, comes from not knowing, from being in rapport with the mystery of reality, from wondering, from being curious, from being open, right? From kind of forcing yourself to take a different perspective, from saying, I'm not sure, taking a step back, not a step forward. That's what lends itself to the development of wisdom. The greatest insights happen to us in moments of awe. And so if you find the language a little bit cryptic, a little bit overwhelming, a little bit hard, I think honestly, that's because that's what awe and reverence is. Awe and reverence is not something that we can simply sum up and hand out an equation for how to come about or how to achieve. It happens in moments when we're not sure, when we're perplexed, when we feel small, but we're drawn to find our place. We feel small, but we want to come closer. We want to be part of something bigger than this space, than this time, than this city, than this era. We want to be part of something that is overwhelming, but we're drawn to it nonetheless. Those moments are moments of awe, of moments of reverence. I'm curious before we go to the second skill, right, or the second tool, if anyone feels that resonance in an experience that they have, because for me, I always come back to the Yamim Noraim. I always come back to tefillah of the Yamim Noraim. When you have a room full of people, right, saying the same thing with intensity, with voices that are loud, nobody's shy, nobody's holding back. You feel something experientially, right? You don't want to sit and describe it and write an essay about it. It lifts you up. It takes you somewhere. And then you realize I'm just one little piece in this sea of people, but I am one piece, right? Because if I'm just one piece and the person next to me is just one piece and we all think we're nothing, then the whole entity doesn't exist. So we all are one piece, but we're one piece. And that's the awe and the reverence, to slow down, to be curious, to wonder, to listen, right? How can we nourish and grow those moments of reverence in our lives? And I'm not talking just religiously, but of course religiously, right? Heschel talks a lot about religious services and how let down he felt when he came from Europe as an immigrant before the war. And he grew up in a shtetl, and he came to an American shul, and he thought maybe I walked into the wrong place, right? There was something missing for him. And he tried to convey that over to his students. The Rav Soloveitchik talks about this all over the place, right? About how the one thing he could never convey to his students is the experiences that he had, because he couldn't convey them with words. You had to be there to feel it, to experience it, to take it in. And he felt that he failed his students in being unable to give that over because they weren't present in the experiences that he had within him so deeply experientially. I'm curious, I'm going to pause for just a minute and see if anybody would like to share there, and don't feel bad if you don't want to. I speak for a living. I can keep going, right? I know you're all muted, so I don't know if anybody laughed or not. But right? But does anybody want to share a moment or a feeling of reverence, of awe, something that we can take with us from you experientially? You just unmute yourself and jump in. It's so hard with everybody talking over each other. I'm kidding. Nobody's talking. Okay. So you know what? It's actually not so shocking. It's not one of the things that we often reflect upon. Oh, did I hear somebody on mute? Wishful thinking. Okay. It's not something that we often think about. And I think one of the things we're feeling inherently is, even if I did have it, I may feel kind of, for lack of a better word, I may feel kind of silly talking about it, because once I try to put it into words, it sounds kind of mundane, because that's what awe is. That's what reverence is. It's an experience that's felt so significantly, but once you try to put it into words, something is lost in that. And so it's a hard concept to talk about, but you feel it. And when you feel it, you know you're feeling it. You know you're feeling something reverent, right? Reverence is simply put, right, is being in the presence of something that just kind of takes your breath away, but you don't want to run. You're not afraid. Remember that word from Yaakov, vayira, right? Most of the translations say he was afraid, but it doesn't make sense. He was afraid and he says, oh my God, God is here, but he doesn't run. Vayira is not just fear. Vayira is awe. He's in awe. He's overwhelmed, right? He's simply overwhelmed, because according to Rashbam, he was doing ordinary things and he wasn't noticing the depth of what he could have been picking up on. And when he did, it was like, it's like one of those, what are those things called? We have one of those books, where you're like staring at an object and then it comes into view. And then once you see it, you're like, oh, duh, how could I have not seen it the whole time? Right? That's kind of the experience that he was having. Couldn't see it. And then it was there. All right, so let's go to number 2, right? Tool number two, right? We need to take a quick look at one other text to give us some background for tool number 2. This is also a somewhat familiar text. It's the story of Moshe after he leaves the palace gates and goes out to look around and to find people and to see what's going on outside the palace gates. And he finds, or he observes, 3 different events, right? Each of them have their own paragraph, but I bolded them so we could just look at the bold. The first event is Vayar Ish Mitzri Makeh Ish Ivri Me'achav. He sees an Egyptian beating up a Jew, right? And what does he do? He goes and he kills the Egyptian. And then Vayitze Bayom HaSheni, Pasuk Yud Gimel, the second paragraph, he goes out a second day and he sees the bolded words, Hinei Shnei Anashim Ivrim Nitzim. He sees 2 Jews fighting. And what does he do? He says to the one who he feels is the instigator, the text refers to him as the Rasha, he says, why are you doing this? And they look at him and they say, oh, you're going to kill one of us like you killed the Egyptian, right? And Moshe becomes very afraid. He realizes that what he had done was witnessed and people know about it. And he runs from Egypt. And he gets to Pasuk Tatzai in the 3rd paragraph. He gets to Mijan. And he arrives in Mijan, and the Kohen of Mijan has 7 daughters. Look at Pasuk Tzayin. Vatavona, vatidlena, vatimalena et harahatim lashkot et tzon avihen. They were at the well, and they were filling up the buckets to feed their father's sheep. Pasuk Yud Zayin, bolded words, vayavo haroim vayigarshum. These other shepherds came and they chased the women away. What was their intention? Their intention was to chase the women away and take the water that they had just worked very hard to pull from the well. But Moshe happens to be standing there. Moshe shoos away the shepherds, allowing the women to have their water, and they feed their sheep. And this is the best pasuk, pasuk Yirchet. Vatavona el ru'el avihen. They go home. Vayomer, and their father says to them, Madua mihartam bo hayom. Why are you home so early today? The implications of that question is that it usually takes them longer. Why does it usually take them longer? Because likely they are often, right, drawing water and then overpowered by some other bullies who come, shoo them away, take their water, and then they have to do it a second time. So they usually come home much later. But today they came home earlier, and they go and they share that this, savior at the well had saved them. And what we see right after these 3 incidents, right? Moshe seeing an Egyptian hitting a Jew, Moshe seeing 2 Jews fighting, And Moshe's seeing no Jews involved, right? The Benot Mijan and the shepherds of Mijan, the women being bullied by the shepherds of Mijan. What we see right after that in Shmot Gimel is that Moshe haya ro'eh et son yitro chotno kohen Mijan. Moshe was going out to shepherd the sheep of his father-in-law, right? He marries one of the women. Vayinhag et hatzon achar hamidbar, bolded words. He goes to shepherd the sheep deep, deep into the desert. Vayavo el har Elokim choriva. He went deep into the desert to find God. And I think the text, I've seen this written by many people, right? The Sforno puts it most succinctly. The Sforno says, Vayavo el har Elokim choriva, hu levado, lehitboded ulehitpalel. He went far into the desert to try and connect with God, to pray to God. Think about Moshe for just a moment, right? Moshe is observing humanity. He sees an Egyptian beating a Jew. He sees two Jews beating up on each other. He sees non-Jews beating up on each other. And Moshe runs. And he says, you know what, God? I give up. I give up on humanity. I give up on justice. I give up on rules of right and wrong. I still want a relationship with you, but I can't find it among the people. There's no justice among the people. There's no humanity over there. I need to go away from humanity, away from people. I'm going to go deep into the desert, and there, on my own, by myself, I will look for you. And there, you and I, God, can have a relationship. What is God's response to Moshe? He looks at Moshe and he says, guess where you're going? Right back to Egypt, right? You're going back to Egypt. You're going back amongst the people, within the people. You're going right back to where you came from, because he gives Moshe, right, an understanding that finding God in isolation, a true relationship with God, is intimately connected with living among the people and with the people. And so number two, right, skill number two is that when we're looking for God in the ordinary, one of the places we have the ability to see what we call tselem Elokim is noticing people, noticing what they do for one another, noticing, right, where people move out of their comfort zones, noticing where people do things that we would not expect. And we would not expect in the sense that it's not even like, oh, I mean, you know, I wouldn't expect it, but I kind of would expect it. No. We're noticing, right, people doing things that really display the spark of godliness within them. Small actions, big actions, everything in between. I saw two quotes really putting this in wonderful language. The first is from Rabbi Sachs, The Great Partnership, one of his many books. He writes, I have sought God, not through philosophical proofs, not through scientific demonstrations or theological arguments, not through miracles or mysteries or inner voices or sudden epiphanies, not by ceasing to question or challenge or doubt, not by blind faith or existential leap, certainly not by abandonment of reason and an embrace of the irrational. These things have brought many people to God, but they have also brought many people to worship things that are not God, like power or ideology or race. Instead, I have sought God in people. People in themselves seem to point to something or someone beyond themselves. Reminds me a little bit, right, of some of the things that Elie Wiesel writes about when people say and asked him after the war, right, how could you want to be among the Jewish people after what you just went through? And he said, you think I'd rather be part of the other side, right? Think about who exuded the godliness, the humanity in all of this. Those people are deeply connected with God. Back to Abram Joshua Heschel, who says it more succinctly, but just as eloquently. There is no reverence for God without reverence for man. Love of man is the way to the love of God. And I would say it slightly differently, which is seeing God in people is a means to seeing God through the ordinary interactions that we have on a regular basis. God displays godliness through people. We carry a spark of God. And when we act in ways that magnify that spark, it's a way to say, wow, and be awed and develop reverence. And so I want to summarize for a moment and leave a few minutes for questions or comments, right? Finding God is not an easy endeavor. And so anybody who signed on and said, here we go, we're going to get the cheat sheet. We're going to get 5 ways. I'm going to go home. I'm going to find God. I've told this story very often. I'll tell it very quickly because I think it's humorous, but it's very telling, right? I remember when I was in 11th grade and my secular studies principal converted from Christianity to Judaism. She started out, her first name was Marion, and she ended up being Miriam. And I remember as rebellious teenagers, we would ask her, like, why are you doing this? You still have a chance. Don't do this. Stay away, right? Go live your life. Don't. And she told us once a story. She said when she told her mother, who was very devoutly Catholic, that she was looking into Judaism, her mother stopped speaking to her. And she said, it's like an intermarriage for me. This is not okay. And her mother was unfortunately diagnosed a few months later with a terminal illness, and she passed away. And in her will, she wrote that she didn't want her daughter at the burial. I don't want my daughter there. She can find her way back. When she finds her way back, she can come and pay her respects. And my principal related to us that she didn't go to the funeral, but she went after the funeral and sat by the graveside. And she sat for hours till it was dark. And she looked up at one point, and for the first time in her life, she saw a shooting star. And she felt that that was God's way of saying, it's okay, you're on the right path, keep going. And I remember I heard that story, and for a few days, I think my mother's on this chat, she's gonna get a kick out of this one. I remember I went out for a few days to the balcony that I had off my room, and I looked up in the dark sky, and I said, okay, God, send it, I'll be a good kid, I promise. I'll do what you ask. Send my shooting star. Night 1, no shooting star. Night 2, no shooting star. Night 3, no shooting star. Night 4, no shooting star. Right? And that was the beginning of my understanding that it doesn't work that way. Right? You can't ask for it and expect it to be delivered in that way. Finding God is hard from the beginning. And so the tools that we have are tools that take work and take effort and take trial and error and take confusion. Right? Really, really looking at both of the tools that we talked about, right? Developing and nurturing a sense of reverence, a sense of awe, finding those moments, helping to be a part of people who create opportunities for those moments. That's tool number 1. But tool number 2, right, is really being able to see godliness in people. And of course, the flip side of that is also true, and that is being the people who are observable to others as those who carry the spark of God. None of that is easy. All of that takes work, and it's a lifelong endeavor. It's a road we travel on individually, but I think it's a road we have to travel on collectively. We cannot do this in isolation. The same way that Moshe thought he could go find God deep into the desert, God said, I'm going to teach you one thing, right? You're going to have a lot of headaches from the job I'm about to set you up for, but you're also going to connect with me in ways that you couldn't connect alone. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing today. And it's one of the challenges that we're living with day in and day out and approaching, right? A high holiday where I speak just from, being in a building where we have over 2,000 people on a regular year and feeling the reverence and the connection and what we can do for each other and that uplifting. And we don't have that today. And so we really, really are struggling with regards to that. We really are. And therefore, we have to work even harder when we can, right? Being realistic, right? About taking advantage of the moments that present themselves to us. The moments of awe that are quieter at our own tables, in our own backyards, in smaller interactions, in lighter moments. Those have potential too. When we get together communally, we have those bigger moments. And please God, we'll have them again. But we have the ability now to work to develop those in the smaller, quieter moments and to notice others and to develop ourselves to be those individuals who others will notice as well. And so I hope I've given you a little bit of what to think about. I would love If you have any questions, comments, objections, rejections, any and all of the above, right? I'm open to it. You can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. I'm going to actually stop the recording. So if you do want to say something, you can speak without being recorded. You can always email me. This to me is an ongoing conversation. This is just the beginning. And the more we share with one another and support one another in this endeavor, the closer we will get, because I will end with this. We simply cannot do it alone. We cannot. And I'm just seeing something in the chat. And as we are separated from one another, it makes it that much harder. So again, thank you. Does anybody